It's the Real News Network, and I'm Greg Wilpert coming to you from Baltimore. The giant aerospace and rail manufacturing company, Bombardier, based in Montreal, Canada, is under suspicion of having committed a war crime over a contract to provide trains to the Israeli railway system. The Israeli Ministry of Transportation recently opened a new high-speed train line between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, illegally cutting through the occupied West Bank and confiscating lands from Beit Iksa and Beit Surek. Here's what PLO Executive Committee member Hanan Ashrawi and a resident of the area had to say about the train.
Where this train is for the use of Israelis only, so they cannot use the pretext that they've confiscated Palestinian land or they've built this train in order to serve the Palestinians, because it serves purely the Israelis as part of the system of annexation and the system of apartheid in Israel.
It's very sad. You see a railway and see modern technology on your land and inside your land, and you can't use it or benefit from it.
According to the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice in The Hague from 2004, infrastructure support for any permanent changes of the conditions in areas under Israeli occupation constitutes a war crime. The organization Independent Jewish Voices of Canada published an open letter to Bombardier calling on the company to stop providing trains to the Israeli apartheid railway system. Also, a new book came out about the violations committed by Bombardier. The book is called Bombardier Abroad, written by David P. Thomas. It covers 3 countries in which Bombardier is involved in dispossession: South Africa, Tibet, and Israel. We're joined now by Jonathan Kutab. He is a human rights lawyer who is taking action to stop Bombardier's complicity with dispossession in Palestine. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us today, Jonathan.
You're welcome.
Now, Dr. Lutz Bertling of Bombardier stated that he has no problem with Bombardier trains going beyond the Green Line. Does the company have legal protection to say how Israel uses their trains is not the company's concern and that they can keep selling them to Israel?
No, clearly not. The law on this question is very clear. Any company that knowingly allows and participates in action that is clearly violative of international law is, of course, responsible for the violation and is complicit and is itself guilty of the said violation.
The fact that the 2 biggest cities in Israel, Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, have not been connected by a fast train line since the founding of the State of Israel has been a major source of embarrassment and a cause of traffic jams and loss of money. Now, the German railway company Deutsche Bahn recently withdrew from the project because it violates international law. So why doesn't the Israeli government just plot a route that stays inside Israel and avoids violating international law?
There's 2 reasons, actually. The first is that Israel, while openly and legally considering this not part of the State of Israel, in fact has treated all the occupied territories as basically its own. They have violated international law left, right, and center and gotten away with it. They act as the sovereign in that area when they are only a belligerent occupation. So ideologically, Israel has no problem. They think this is all ours, we can do whatever we want. But secondly, and the more important reason, is because Israel believes it can get away with it. It believes that it can violate clearly provisions of international law and not suffer any consequences, whether it's economic, political, or legal. They feel that the international community is pretty much quiescent, that the United States will actively oppose the imposition of international law sanctions upon it. They feel that the BDS movement, which is the popular civil attempt to bring them to compliance with international law, is a real danger. That's why they spend so much energy fighting BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, because they don't believe they have the tools to prevent civil society from calling upon them to comply with international law.
Now, what kinds of consequences do you think Bombardier may face for its violation of international law? Is there a chance to extract compensation from the company? And could executives risk being personally liable for complicity for committing a war crime?
Theoretically, yes. The reality, however, is that there is a huge gap between what international law is and the ability, particularly of weak actors, to enforce compliance. International law has been progressing in fits and starts. Especially during the last 10 or 20 years, the United States, particularly, and Israel also, have tried to reduce compliance, reduce the effectiveness of the tools that are available to enforce international law. They have resisted the creation of the International Criminal Court, which, by the way, now exists, and it lists apartheid as one of the bases for its jurisdiction. So they think they can get away with it, and they think that the Palestinians and their supporters are too weak to pay what I would call the transactional costs of bringing them to justice under international law.
One last question. What would it take for this, the international law norms to be applied in this particular case?
Well, I would like to point out that it is more important to recognize that there is a violation of international law, because international law, like regular law, is based on common acceptance. Most people follow traffic regulations because they are legitimate and everybody follows them. You don't need a policeman at every corner or a camera at every corner for people to stop at red lights and to drive on the right-hand side instead of the left-hand side of the road. Similarly, with international law, it develops because all the international community and the world runs better when everybody follows international law, and it's not based on actually catching people violating it and bringing them to court. That is usually the exception. The rule is people ought to and do, in fact, follow international law.
Okay, well, we'll continue to follow the situation, but we'll leave it there for now. I'm speaking to Jonathan Kutab, human rights lawyer involved in the Bombardier case in Palestine. Thanks again, Jonathan, for having joined us today.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining the Real News Network.